divine name in terms of what we see in the Old Testament as God's name. God's name in Hebrew in the Old Testament is the word Yahweh, Yav-He, Vav-He, and that's how scholars approximate its pronunciation. And where this actually comes from is Exodus chapter 3, with the story of the burning bush. When Moses encounters the burning bush, he asks, what if people ask the name of the God who has sent me? And God replies and says, Yah has sent you. And this is translated as I am, but it's more accurate as I will be. It's sort of a funny word to decline in Hebrew. Now, it doesn't really make any sense for Moses to go out and say, I will be has sent me. So instead, God says, Yahweh, the God of our ancestors, he has sent me to you. That's what he says Moses should tell them. And Yahweh means he will be. In terms of the one who is upholding the universe, we could argue, is sort of an approximation of what that means. Now, in order to understand how this is rendered in English translations, or maybe you've heard, what's up with Jehovah compared to Yahweh, compared to Elohim? Well, in order to understand this, we need to go back to how Hebrew was written, because the Hebrew word Yahweh was not spoken out loud at a certain point in Jewish history. In order to avoid committing blasphemy, Jews would come to that word, Yav-He, Vav-He in the Hebrew, and they would, instead of saying out loud the divine name, instead of saying Yahweh, in order to avoid committing blasphemy, instead they would read it as Adonai, which means my Lord. So they would vowel point it actually with the vowels of Adonai and the consonants of Yahweh. I'll explain that just in a minute. So actually, when you see the word Lord in your English translation of the Bible, capital lowercase Lord, what you're seeing is a tradition that is rendered in the Hebrew. That when Jews would, instead of saying Yahweh, the divine name, they would say Adonai. And that is repeated in the Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Old Testament, which the New Testament authors are using a good portion of the time. They render the divine name as Kurios, which is Lord in Greek. Now, when we get Old Testament passages quoted in the New Testament and that runs into the divine name, they likewise render it as Kurios. In the Latin Vulgate, it's translated as Dominus, which is, once again, Lord. And so in your modern English Bibles, you will see capital Lord in uppercase, but in a smaller font. So when you're seeing that in your English Bibles, what you're seeing it is an English translation following a Latin tradition, following a Greek tradition, which follows an older Greek tradition, which goes back to the Hebrew tradition. Now, where do we get words like Yahweh? Well, in order to understand this, we need to understand that really ancient Hebrew was just consonants. If you go back to things like the Dead Sea Scrolls and you look at the Hebrew, it's just consonants. That's how they wrote ancient Hebrew. Well, in the Middle Ages, when people were not speaking Hebrew as much as they were writing Hebrew, a group called the Masoretes, who were Jewish scribes in the Middle Ages, came up with a vowel pointing system where they would add vowel points to the Hebrew text, which gives you little dots and squiggles over and around and above the Hebrew words. So what we see when we start to see the tradition of this not saying the name of God out loud is where the consonants of Yahweh were used in the text. They would take the vowels of Adonai. And so what that would give you, if you would read it out loud, was the consonants of Yahweh, vowel pointed with Adonai, which would give you a word that, if you read it out loud, would be pronounced Yahovah. Now, no ancient Jew or even the Masoretes were reading, and when they came to the divine name, they would read out loud Jehovah. Nobody was doing that. It was a linguistic tool to remember that when you came to this word, not to read the divine name, but actually to read the vowel pointing of Adonai. Now, Germanic scholars later on who were reading but not speaking Hebrew came to these types of things, and they were reading Yehovah. They were Germanizing it, and the Y turned into a J because there's no J in Hebrew, and that's where you get Jehovah. Jehovah is sort of this Germanicized, anglicized version of Yehovah. But once again, no Jew was ever saying Yehovah. They were either seeing Yahweh and then reading Adonai, or if you go further back enough, they were reading Yahweh. And that's where you get, Adonai, meaning my Lord, Yahweh, meaning, the divine name of God, and later on, Jehovah. Elohim simply means God. So that's where, to give a short, brief example of what the background to, Yahweh versus Jehovah versus Adonai versus Elohim, where are these all coming from? It goes back into the traditions and history of Bible writing and translation.